Hey folks, I got another quick video here for you this week. And like I said, I'm working on the electrical video for the KZ900, which will be coming out next week. But I wanted to put this up because this is something might help you really a lot when you're dealing with these carburetors. I made this to be able to stand up these VM series round slide carbs and work on them, because otherwise they flop all over the place. And my other carburetor stand, if you will, which is made out of an old drill press vise. You've seen that one before. This guy right here, it does not work on these guys. There's just no good place for it to sit and clamp in. Whereas like on the CV carbs, the BS34s and similar, they have a thinner piece of metal for a rack mechanism on the back and the front. And you can just put this right in and clamp on that, and they sit real nice for doing service fuel levels or whatever you want to do, working on the diaphragm, slide diaphragms, so forth. But these guys are kind of a pain in the butt. So actually I developed this and I made it when I was working on some KZ650 carbs. I think they're the VM28 SS's, the one with the accelerator pump. Very similar to this, but with accelerator pump. And what this does is it takes advantage of these two screws, these two threaded holes, which apparently are like all these, you know, they're on all of them. I've never seen a rack like this on the round slides that didn't have the two holes here, and that may be what they're for, I don't know. So I just took a piece of square tubing I had laying around, cut it to length, and I initially just hog milled this with a, what do you call it, a roughing mill, half-inch roughing mill on the mill. Brought it down pretty thin, but it's still strong enough. And that's for the two holes that capture it here. Now this is offset from one end to the other because the holes are different distance as far as clearance goes from the top to the bottom. So I needed it longer up here because you have this part protruding, so it essentially sits like this. Now on the KZ650 carbs, I didn't have any interference issue, but on these I did. So I put it back in the mill and I milled this across and then milled a slot in, and it gives me clearance for this part and this part here, which again, I didn't seem to have that problem with the other rack, but I guess they're all a little bit different, even though they're kind of the same. And so there's two M4 screws that thread into these holes. They don't need to be very long. And so I just tapped M4 threaded holes in here just to keep them so they don't get lost. So that's essentially just where they live. Then all you do is you put the screws in here with it in the right orientation, so the longer parts up here and the shorter parts down here. Now the next thing we need to do is come up with a way to keep it upright and not fall over. So you probably saw this sitting here, not my Mortsky repair screwdriver, but this guy right here is the old drill press vise. It's kind of like a drill press vise from the Jet mill. When I bought the Jet mill, this is actually a Jet item. It says Jet on it. You can tell because of the way it is. And so all I do is I put the rack in there. Now these are very heavy, so you'd have to use some sort of a heavy vise, or you know, a vise like this over here. Otherwise it'll tip over. But this is a pretty heavy piece of cast iron. So the nice thing about this now, I can work on them right side up, back or front. And then what I can also do when I want to work on the bottom section at the float bowls and so forth, I just spin it around and clamp it back up. So yeah, that works out pretty well. And so this is how I worked on these carbs here and the KZ650s I had before for that gentleman who's a local subscriber. And so I took care of, you know, I took care of all the things I needed to take care of in this particular rack. The only thing I have to do last, or next I should say, is do a service fuel level on it, which I'm not going to film because you've seen that before. But of course I would just spin it around, put it like this, clamp it back up, and I can lean it in the vise here, you know, this way to level it. And as long as it's reasonably level this way, we can do our service fuel level test, spin it back around. If I needed to take the float bowls off to make a few adjustments, pretty easy, just turn it right back around, clamp it back in, and boom. Now if any of you guys want me to make one of these for you, I'll do that. You just got to give me some lead time and we'll come up with a price. because I don't think anybody sells anything like this. But if I can source some other bar stock, some square tubing, this is a kind of a thick walled piece of square tubing, but I'm sure I can get another piece like it, and mill it out for you and paint it up and put the 2 holes you're going to need. I think they're standard on all these VM carbs, the ones down here. Even give you a couple of M4 screws and you should be able to use it. I can't do anything for you with a vise, but that's up to you. So reach out to me if you want something like this. We'll come up with a plan.